So we have 5 indicators that we're always looking at when it comes to the SPY. So with the SPY, I'm looking at MFI, RSI, MACD, the ADX. Woohoo! Love that one. And the ULT. To be honest with you, the Ultimate Oscillator is really just something that is adding a little bit of confirmation for me. It's not exactly the most important thing in the world, but let's break down and walk through each of these, okay, because it's important. So first you have RSIs, right? RSI is the Relative Strength Index, and this is tracking price movement over a period of time. We're doing it in this case over a 14-day period of time, and we're measuring effectively price movement in short bursts of time. The key thing that we're looking for here is this one line here, and this is the RSI 14, and right here you see when you get down under 30, this suggests that we are oversold in that scenario. This range of the RSI goes from 0 to 100, but under 30 is typically considered oversold. Why? I don't know. They just decided that's just what Wells Wilder Jr. wanted to do back in the 1978s. Crazy guy, right? Just slinging statistics around all the time. But here you go. You see, when things get oversold, they tend to lead to a little bit of a reversal, and we have taken advantage of this year just watching the RSI. But sometimes things can be oversold for extended periods of time. So if you bought here on the 21st of January, we didn't get out of oversold conditions on the SPY until the 28th. You'll see some other stocks when you're looking at RSI that can be extended for weeks, possibly months, because there's no bid, because nobody wants them. The key thing is really just to determine bullishness and bearishment in price momentum. This is a price momentum oscillator. So when you get above 70, that typically can signal overbought territory. And look at what happens here. You have an RSI over 70 back here in August. That's when we hit that 200-day moving average. We saw a pretty distinct sharp sell-off that transpired after that. But RSI alone is not, you just can't use just this, all right? Because sometimes things will remain very, very strong for an extended period of time. Let's take a look at Occidental, for example. This is back in March, right? So back in March, Occidental went overbought here. You had a little bit of a sell-off, not too significant, but here you went from overbought in this situation on the 28th. The stock was at 39. It remained overbought up to 60. So if you tried to short it in this range, it wasn't going to work. So you have to be able to pay attention and try to look for some other clues, other tools that are out there for you to help build conviction and identify the best way to plot and understand RSI. Now, RSI can be broken down into daily, weekly, different types of indicators. I'm looking at the 14-day primarily, but when you're day trading, you can see in short periods of time that there are overbought, oversold conditions for a particular stock or the SPY or anything else that might be rallying on a specific day. As you can see, we opened this morning with the SPY popping this morning at 384, and then all of a sudden, really kind of that 1 minute that 1 minute RSI, this thing bled off, and it bled off pretty quickly. So that's the MFI. Forgive me. Let me find an example of this. This I will revisit because that MFI is very important from this morning. Let's take a look at Meta. So Meta RSI 5 minute. As you could see, when we opened this morning, we were oversold. We were oversold on the 5 minute. And we got a little bit of a bump, a little bit of a run, pushed back up to 101, and then this thing just kind of died off. But MFI is where we're going to start to talk about next. Any questions about RSI? MSFT. Look at MSFT on the daily, okay? So here's Microsoft, and you can see this was in oversold territory for a pretty extended period of time, down around that 30 level as it was selling off down here. But when we combine this with MFI, and MFI is very important, this is the money flow index. Money flow index is a little different. Money flow index provides us a little bit of an understanding of both price and volume. And there's a big difference between the two because, again, the RSI is only focusing on price movements, where the MFI is focusing on price movements and volume. There's a calculation for us to get a better understanding of whether or not money is coming in or coming out of the market and how much volume is involved in that process. So what's important about this, it's just like the RSI, but this range that we're looking for is that 20 level up to the 80 level. And what's interesting about this is that when the MFI, because you're combining volume, you may find a situation where the price of a stock is moving higher, but the MFI is dropping. That is potentially signaling that you are in overbought conditions and that a reversal is potentially coming soon. So we are always looking for, when we're looking for breakouts, we want to see the RSI pushing above 50. We want to see the MFI pushing above on the 14-day on the daily chart at 50 as well. And again, when you look at this, you see this kind of blue line down here. This is signaling an oversold condition, which presents an opportunity. When you see a stock price, though, going up, see how this is moving up. This is the period in late April where the SPY was moving a little bit higher, but the MFI was moving lower. That is a divergence. And that is a signal that there is a possibility that we will see a sell-off relatively soon. And as you can see, even though we moved higher there, we were seeing this kind of sell-off. That divergence was in play, and we had that helped factor into the sell-off on the backside of April into May. This was a little tiny short blip while this was happening. The RSI was improving. We saw some buying at that period in April. That was a short-term pop in momentum, but it gave everything back, and it gave it back very, very quickly, and we saw yet another sell-off. So here we are back in October. MFI hit that oversold period. We had a little bit of a pop. This is a very good clue when we get down into these low areas, low volume and price indicator, that we can see a reversal relatively quickly for a short-term play. And as we're seeing, the MFI is starting to move toward that 80 level. And if we look at the SPY, we were seeing improvement in the SPY as well. Now we might see a market that, as it hits its 50-day moving average, may be ready to start to give back gains, particularly if Apple has an ugly report tomorrow. Now, this is where it gets really fun. The MACD. What are you? Why are you here? Okay. The MACD is the moving average convergence divergence. Say it with me. The MACD is the moving average convergence divergence. And we're looking here at a line that is subtracting itself. This red line down here is our trend line. And the black line is effectively our subtracting the 26-day exponential moving average from the 12-day exponential moving average. And what it's giving us is a signal into a couple of things. One, whether or not something is overbought or oversold, told by the trend line itself. And these trend lines are comparative to one another, but they're also something that you can eye just a little bit. And they also help us get a little bit of an understanding of the strength of the directional move of a particular stock. You're seeing down here within this base, you're seeing the MACD, you're seeing the black line. That's the line we're looking for. And this trend line that we are watching, that's the signal line, right? The signal line is what we care about. That signal line also accompanies a histogram. That histogram is effectively providing us a better understanding of bullish or bearish momentum. So as that histogram shows strength, it gets wider and wider and bluer and higher. That's strength in the trend. And as you can see, as this moves quickly, as it moves off of its line in a quick manner, this is where these rallies have taken place. You saw this happen back in March, a significant break from the signal line, the MACD breaking higher, signaling, right? The black line moving positive over the signal line, signaling a possible breakout in conditions. And then when you roll back over under your line, this is the weekly line. The idea here is that this is the opportunity to sell, go short, get out of the way. And we've seen these big moves multiple times on the weekly. Now, all of this exists within the daily, but I prefer to use the within hourly, weekly, monthly, however you want to calculate it. But typically, I'm watching the daily on this number because I'm going to be combining this with a handful of other indicators, the RSI, the MFI, the MACD. The problem with the MACD, unfortunately, is that you can get a lot of this. See this chop where the black line goes under the red and then it chops around, and then that's not giving us any clear indicator in any capacity. So that's the problem with the MACD. The problem with the MACD is that it often may signal a reversal, and the reversal doesn't come. And a perfect example of that was obviously in April. You had this little tiny sell-off, and then it kicks higher. Some people may have gotten out at this point. If it would have crossed over, maybe you would have hung out, but some people might have stopped out here. So you're looking for a continued divergence between these, and you're looking for this line to continue to move lower for longer. So you need another tool to help you understand whether or not the trend that you are seeing is in place. And that's where the ADX comes in. That is the average directional index. And this was created by some other guy with, probably should have created his own metaverse. His name was Wells Wilder. And this is a technical indicator as well. Now, what you're looking at here is this black line. The black line is critical, but you've got this negative directional indicator, that's the red line, and then you have the green line, that's the positive directional indicator. And what you're looking for virtually at all times is the green indicator to go over the red indicator, and that would signal a positive movement in the market. But you need to be able to use this black line to identify whether or not that is a solid trend or not. There is a number over here on the far right side. Anything under 20 signals that the price is trendless. So it may signal that MACD move that you saw, that little pullback, that move lower, might not necessarily be what you thought it was. And in this case here, where you had this crossover right here, that period of time in April, we were under 20 here. So that would suggest that the trend is not in place. But as you can see, when we broke out here, the red line, the negative directional, broke out and the green line breaks down, you see that the black line starts to increase over the 20, and 25 is where we are looking for. The ADX at 25 signaling a trend is in place, a possible breakout or breakdown move is happening. And once you get to that 25, you can see this trend was clearly in place, lower for longer. When it was breaking down, when the trend effectively ended, you see the black line coming down. And then we had that ADX crossover that transpired. Now, some people will look at this and say, well, I'm only going to follow the black line. The problem is that you might miss this sell-off if that's the case, because you are waiting for that trend to pick up. So what you need is to have more indicators help provide you with more insight of overbought and oversold conditions. The ultimate oscillator is another just price and directional momentum indicator. So we're going to combine them all, and we're going to look and identify outside of the traditional, more advanced momentum indicators that people can use, the ones that combine the 7 different cycles of stocks, where they are doing the subtraction, all that stuff by hand. What you can really do in this situation is you can identify whether or not a sell-off is a trend and worth following. So you would have had at the beginning of the year a negative switchover on the MACD. You could see the RSI was breaking down under 50. The MFI was breaking down under 50. The ADX moves here, and this broke down to its mean level as well. You had 5 different indicators all moving lower at the exact same time, signaling that a sell-off was potentially coming. And sure enough, it came, and it came fast. Now, what happens here on the 28th, you start to see this trend is leveling out. This is now, at this point, that black line signals that we may be oversold comparatively to other past sell-offs. Look how low this line is compared to other previous sell-offs. So we may be signaling oversold. We see that we're oversold on RSI. We know we're oversold on MFI. And we know we not even really need to pay attention to the ULT at that point. We have these 3 things in place, all telling us oversold conditions. Now, the ADX negative indicator is coming down. The ULT is improving. And then we combine some other indicators from outside of the space. Insider buying. Strongest amount of insider buying this year happened on January 28th. And sure enough, all of these things created a buy the dip opportunity. We had a big move here from around 431 up to about 456 in about a week and a half. Now look at the other major negative it moves down this year. An ADX crossover that happened on, or MACD crossover negative that happened on April 7th. MFI falls under 50. RSI falls under 50. ADX swings negative. And we see the ULT starting to break down. That became an opportunity to short, and the trend was confirmed right around here as this ADX started to improve. This was already negative. This was negative. The MFI was breaking down and the ULT was breaking down. So this is just a way to eye the strength of individual stocks, individual equities, and try to get a sense right now whether or not we should be buying or selling. And in this environment, as you could see, coming off this bottom last week, we were oversold in October, early October, kicking into those lows that we just hit, coming off near oversold, positive crossover on the trend line. And you're seeing improvement here in the ADX, signaling a possible trend emerging to the upside. This was for the short term, and the ULT was improving. You can look at a lot of different stocks. Go out and look and see what's out there. Look at MSFT, for example. What you see here in this period back in August, all of these indicators effectively turning negative. MFI goes under 50. RSI goes under 50. MACD crosses over, signaling a potential negative move. ADX negative crossover, and the ULT plunging under from its oversold all the way down here. This was an opportunity to short Microsoft. Then you want to combine a lot of this stuff with other indicators. As I said, are insiders buying the stock? You know, for example, Fifth Third Bank, a lot of insiders just came in and bought the stock. Well, what we're seeing here, since that insider buy looks like increasing positive trend. Strength here, all moving higher, 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 higher. You can just eyeball this, and this can give you a little bit more conviction. And these are all momentum indicators. These are all momentum indicators. So when we are in green territory, these are the types of things that we want to trade. Now, this is all very difficult to eyeball. And this is what we do over the world's biggest trade is we have one big screener of stocks that have consistently outperformed when we go positive. And rather than having to dig through all of this, and you can dig through all of this, but as you can see, one of the top companies this year is DVN, Devon Energy. As you can see, DVN gets that positive swing, those positive movements here, gets a little bit of a trend. This becomes a breakout stock. When it goes into overbought conditions, it becomes a short. MFI, RSI, crossover here on the MACD, negative switch on the ADX. Look how far this thing falls. 77 down to 54. This was one of the top performing companies, though, when we get the positive breakout on momentum. So July 19th, last major significant momentum break move, 53, took us all the way up to September, up to 72. So I want you to just think about this again. It can feel a little bit like palm reading. I understand that. But when you operate and you use all of these different indicators together, you can help build conviction. That's what's so important. And we're going to be digging into this more and more next week once we get on the other side of this period. Oversold means stocks are being bought. Oversold means that stocks are being sold too far. Okay, so in the case of Devon Energy right here, back in October 27th, you see this huge sell-off down to 55. You see the MFI drop here, but you also see the RSI fall down to 30. It's at 28. That signals oversold for that stock. What is the significance of the ULT? The ULT is another momentum oscillator. And then when you're looking for the black and the red is your signal line. The black is the MACD itself. So that when the MACD breaks over the red line, that is a potential signal of a breakout pattern. And when it falls under, it is a signal of a potential breakdown. If you are looking at this and you want confidence in that trend, you want to use the ADX. And if the ADX is over 25, that is a signal of a trend.